Okay, hello, hello, hello. I love the energy in this room. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Lisa Grelo, and I am the scientific lead of the Women's Health Research Cluster, as well as Women Mind here at CAMH. And we're really, really happy to see such a huge, wonderful crowd. I'm also very gratified that we're here to celebrate, gathered today here to celebrate International Women and Girls in Science. And I'm especially grateful because, as you may know, there's a political climate that seems to want to erase, perhaps, girls, women, people of color, trans, gender diverse individuals. And as a group, we cannot allow that to happen. So let's learn more about loving our brains, no matter who we are. So first, I'd like to start us off with a land acknowledgement. CAMH is situated on lands that have been occupied by First Nations for millennia. Lands rich in civilizations with knowledge of medicine, architecture, technology, and extensive trade routes throughout the Americas. In 1860, the site of CAMH appeared in the Colonial Records Office of the British Crown on the council grounds of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, as they were known at the time. Today, Toronto is covered by Toronto Purchase Number 13 of 1805 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Toronto is now home to a vast diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis who enrich the city. CAMH is committed to reconciliation. We will honor the land through programs and places that reflect and respect its heritage. We will embrace the healing practices and traditions of the ancestors and weave them into our caring practices. We will create new relationships and partnerships with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and share the land and protect it for future generations. Now, I just want to say, last Friday, I was at another international celebration of International Women and Girls in Science event, and Lisa Richardson, who's Associate Dean of Diversity and Equity in the Faculty of Medicine, talked about an Indigenous principle of 7 generations. So they try to make decisions that they know will not just affect them, but will affect the next 7 generations. And I think what a beautiful thing if we can incorporate into our own decision making. Like, how much could we learn and heal if we could apply that? So we're really excited to have all of you here. One of the big things is knowledge is power. So you're doing yourself a really good service by coming and gaining more knowledge in this space. As anyone who has gone through puberty, I could ask for a show of hands, but pregnancy, menopause, andropause, I see a few, knows hormones play a big role in terms of our lives. They impact our moods, our sleep, our weight, and yes, even our brains. And so today we'll be talking about many of the disparities between males and females, men and women. But I want to make it abundantly clear that the disparities that we talk about are many-fold larger in people of color, Indigenous, trans, and gender diverse individuals. On average, women are diagnosed 2 years later than men are, and that's for over 1,300 different diseases if you average them all up. Why? There's going to be a lot of different reasons for that. But one of the reasons I think contributes the most to that is that most of our medical knowledge, including the way we diagnose people, is based on research in males and experiences of men. So much so that symptoms in females are often called atypical. And you see this atypical label across a wide variety of brain disorders and mental health disorders, including disorders where you see a greater prevalence in females, like depression, but also disorders where you see a greater prevalence in males, like ADHD, and even disorders where there's no difference in sex prevalence at all in terms of who's getting the disorder. So what that suggests to me is that there's a systemic bias. And we already know that words matter. They have consequences, right? Not only for the people that are experiencing these symptoms. My symptoms are not atypical. I'm not atypical. Well, maybe I'm a little atypical. But they also have consequences for our funders, our policymakers, our politicians, our publishers, and also our healthcare providers. But I think that atypical label comes from that sort of standard of males, right? Using that standard of males. We already know that female-specific experiences like menstrual cycles, pregnancy, and menopause can influence our health outcomes and disease risk. And the other point that I really want to punch home is that there's not just one pregnancy. I'm sure many of you that have experienced it or will know several friends that have experienced it, that maybe someone sailed through pregnancy and another one was sick as a dog throughout the whole pregnancy. And the last time she threw up was 2 hours before the baby was born. Thank you, Talon. So they're heterogeneous. It's really important for us to understand disparities across sex, across genders, but also within sex and within genders as well. So that's what another way we like to put it is it's not one size fits all. However, the reality is that women's health, I call it the 3 U's, understudied, undervalued, and underfunded. How understudied is it? About 3% of the research in 2019, and we looked at 3,000 articles, was centered on women's health questions, 3%. 27% on men and men's health, so 9 times more men-only studies or male-only studies and female-only studies. The World Economic Forum released a report 2 years ago now, suggesting that if we could reach gender parity in our knowledge on women's health, and that's across all women's health disciplines, we would save the world economy. I mean, so what? But actually, it's a big deal. $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year. So just think about that. And why? Because it can improve not just women's lives, but men's lives and trans lives and gender diverse lives. We really do need to spend more time and discussion on women's health and more research on women's health questions. Now, I know there's a lot of questions, so without further ado, you know her as the co-host of the Canada's #1 daytime talk show, The Social on CTV. She's interviewed the biggest celebrities and newsmakers over her 20-plus year career, including reporting from the prestigious Academy Awards. You went to the Academy Awards? Lucky, I just watched them in my pajamas on the couch. And she co-hosted the Vancouver Winter Olympics. Last year, she put her passion for women's health on her and launched her first podcast. It's called Aging Gracefully with Melissa Grelo. And oh my God, gracefully, powerfully, aging powerfully with Melissa Grelo, and also Aging Gracefully. But anyway, Aging Powerful, that's better. And she quickly topped the podcast charts across Canada and the world. She interviews top doctors, researchers, and scientists in their field to provide science-based information to a relationship of women. And she loves to tackle misinformation on her social media. Please welcome Melissa Grelo.
Hey, everybody, is this on? Can you hear me okay? Dr. Sheila? Dr. Sheila's here. I'm a big fan also. Okay, so we're going to get this party started. Did you have a good time outside? Yeah. I just got to give a big shout out. This is a beautiful space. It's a beautiful venue. I've never been here before. I don't know if anybody else has, but a huge shout out to CAMH for hosting us today, first of all. Thank you, CAMH. So we know that they are an institution that's just leading the world in mental health and addiction research. So we're so lucky that it's in Toronto. Like, how lucky are we? Also, a big shout out. We want to also shout out to the organizing partners tonight. So Science Up First, the Women's Health Research Cluster, and Women Mind, providing the talk for free tonight. So not only is it for free for us, but I want to give a shout out to everybody. There were a lot of people who wanted in on this. This sold out real quick. So live streaming, everybody who's joining us online, hello and welcome. And you'll have a chance to ask your questions as well via online and everybody here tonight. So let's get this started. We got a lot to get to, and I've got some amazing people to introduce to you. Before we begin, though, I do want to quickly address language and pronouns for this evening. I and some of the experts will often refer to the term woman or women, referring to a broad gender categorization. Again, this does not necessarily relate to one's sex recorded at birth. We're going to be using the term for anyone who self-identifies as such, regardless of gender expression or gender identity. So let me bring up our experts. Are you guys ready? Ladies ready? So it's like a boxing match tonight. So I'm going to say in the corner, representing the preteens and the teenagers this evening, I'm going to welcome to the stage shortly Dr. Melissa Holmes. Dr. Holmes is a professor and associate chair at the Department of Psychology at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and her focus is the importance of the social environment and social interactions in shaping the brain and behavior into and in adulthood. If you have a teenager, if you have a preteen, we remember when we were teenagers, when we were preteens, she's got some answers as to how the hormonal roller coaster ride begins in these crucial years. So please help me welcome Dr. Melissa Holmes. Great name, by the way. So good. You're going by other Melissa. Yeah, okay, got it. Okay, and in the corner, representing women through pregnancy and postpartum is Dr. Crystal Clark. Dr. Clark is the Canada Research Chair in Reproductive Mental Health, Associate Professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Toronto, and Associate Head of Research, Women's College Hospital. Also, one of her areas of focus is actually in mental health of women in pregnancy and postpartum. And also, a huge passion of hers is advancing equity in mental health and research, especially in Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And her focus is the perinatal stage and the postpartum phase. So as the hormonal roller coaster ride continues into pregnancy and beyond, she'll be discussing things like mom brain, qu'est-ce que c'est, postpartum depression, and so much more. Please help me welcome Dr. Crystal Clark. Welcome, welcome. And finally, you already met her. We're all huge fans of hers. She's representing the peri and menopausal and postmenopausal squad tonight, Dr. Lisa Galea. Dr. Galea, welcome back. And let me give her full bio. She is a world-renowned neuroscientist. Dr. Galea is a senior scientist here at CAMH. She's the lead of the Women's Health Research Cluster, the inaugural Women Mind Trail Living Family Chair in Women's Mental Health. And as a neuroscientist, her focus is on how hormones, such as estrogens, influence things like memory, mood, and the brain. She also studies dementia and stress-related psychiatric disorders. She was a very recent guest on my podcast, Aging Powerfully.
Sorry.
Aging Powerfully with Melissa Grelo, and we talked at length about Alzheimer's and dementia. Highly recommended episode, if I may say so. And so while our lives at work, we're very different in what we do, but we both do have daughters that are Swifties. So at least I can say I have that in common with a neuroscientist. Makes me feel very special.
Our own Eras tour, right?
That's right. This is our own Eras tour this evening. Good one. Good one, Dr. Lisa. Okay, so we're going to begin here. So basically, this is a hormonal journey, right? All the eras of our hormones. And we're going to go through a couple of like lay of the land questions with each of our experts in their areas of expertise. And then we're going to mix it up. And then we're going to open up the floor to all of you. Okay. So keep the questions in the back of your mind. Perhaps they'll be answered and maybe not. And people online also, there's a way for you to get your questions in as well. So Dr. Holmes, we're going to start. Let's start. You ready?
Is this on?
Is this on? Do you hear? Get right at the top there. It's just mic technique.
Oh,
It's just
I don't
so
use
gross.
mics.
Call it eating the mic. Eat that mic, Melissa.
This is a party.
Other Melissa.
Wow.
You wanted tequila? I can't. I got you a mic. Okay, eat that mic. Okay, there it is. Okay, so listen, we're going to start. God, we're so giddy already.
I know.
We're not even drinking. I don't even drink. Okay, let's get into it. Let's start with adolescence. I know this sounds like a basic question, but I have a 10-year-old and I'm curious, like what is the actual age, scientifically speaking, that you consider adolescence to begin?
Excellent. I love starting with the foundational knowledge. But before I say anything about timing, I want to make this distinction between adolescence and puberty. So a lot of people use those words interchangeably, but they're not actually the same thing. So puberty is the biological, this obligate developmental stage where your body is changing from becoming a child to becoming reproductively mature. Okay. So that's puberty. Adolescence is the more socio-emotional behavioral stage that surrounds puberty. So in terms of when these things are happening, puberty in girls currently usually starts between the ages of 9 to 13. And that's going to be the things that you think about.
9 sounds young, no? Is this always been that way?
That's a great question.
Oh, no, we're getting there. Okay.
There's actually, it's advancing as time passes. So the age of onset of puberty is actually getting earlier and earlier. So 9 to 13 in girls, usually a year to a little bit later in boys, so 10 to 14, but you can see puberty still going on up into the late teens.
Okay, that's a whole other talk about why puberty is advancing. Okay, so let's talk about the changes that begin in our brains because of hormones through puberty. And I guess, puberty / adolescence, and I'll let you start to make that distinction. Hormones and behavior, what age and what starts happening?
Great question. So we see all of these physiological and biological changes, like girls start to get breasts. They often, they'll start menstruating, things like that, body hair, pubic hair, sometimes some smelliness if you have teenagers. Those things are starting, right? And those are the obvious changes that you see, but what's really happening is hormones working behind the scenes that start years earlier. So usually 2 to 3 years before you actually even start menstruating, your body is already getting ready for the onset of this reproductive maturational process. Now, in terms of the brain, what we're seeing is a lot of maturation of the hormone systems, like specifically involved in reproduction, like testosterone and estradiol, and you're going to hear presumably a lot more about those hormones. There's also a lot of changes happening in the stress system. So stress hormones are changing, but then there's even more changes happening with other hormone systems, like those involved in reward processing, for example. So there's basically no system that is untouched during puberty and adolescence. Everything is changing.
I think a lot of us can think back and remember that.
Yes.
Chaos.
Everything.
Chaos. Okay, so of course, the brain changes, this is not happening in a vacuum. There's the biological part of it that you've discussed, but they're happening in a social context. So let's talk about the interaction and importance of the social environment and brain development at this time. So there's what's going on inside of us, but what is the impact of what's going on around us on this process?
So it would be hard to overstate the importance of the social environment during puberty and adolescence. So adolescence is really about this shift from your family being the center of your social world to potential sex partners and peers being the center of your social world, right? So during adolescence, you are learning how to behave like an adult, and you're learning all of those very, very complicated, nuanced social interactions. Okay. So the social environment is critical here because not only is your brain changing biologically to then change your behaviors like reproductive behavior, right? But your social environment is in turn feeding back and sculpting how your brain is changing. So it's this really, really intricate bidirectional relationship between the brain and the social environment that sculpts every single one of us and sculpts every single one of us differently.
I know it's another talk because, social media is part of that back and forth. I'm going to get to that a little later in the talk. So, in the context of mental health and also hormones and adolescence, what are the things that we start to see in terms of the changes in mental health at this time? And what is impacting either, sort of more positive experience with our mental health and perhaps a fracturing? So what is that interaction again? Hormones, environment, and mental health at this time?
So unfortunately, we see really striking increases in a lot of mental health conditions. So things like anxiety and depression, as well as ADHD, conduct disorder. There's a lot of things that are changing in teenagers because of all of these brain changes. It's a very complicated interaction between hormones, brain structure, and behavior. So I can't say there's a single causal relationship, but they're absolutely important in changing those things. With respect to girls in particular, there's almost a doubling, at least, of depression and anxiety. The data from the National Institute of Health in the United States before the pandemic went from approximately 12% in 12-year-old girls to 20% prevalence in 18-year-olds. So that almost a doubling throughout the adolescent period. The stats are, or the pattern is the same in boys, but the overall prevalence is significantly less, like 3% to 6% over that same period. And then the data since the pandemic are saying that it's as high as 1 in 3, if not higher. So like 33% of teens are experiencing depression, anxiety, et cetera.
Okay, so, what's going to help a teen or preteen get through this era a little more smoothly? And conversely, what are the factors that you see are really negatively impacting, in particular, girls through this phase?
So I think I'm going to bring it back to the importance of the social environment and not pathologizing puberty in adolescence. Like this is a really important period that we will all go through. And the way that I think about it is like when my kids were learning to walk, they make a lot of mistakes. They fall. And you help them up and you tell them what a good job they're doing and you congratulate that progress. But when your teenager, metaphorically falls down and makes mistakes, nobody congratulates them for that. They get so much negative reinforcement, and that's a really strong message for somebody who's trying to learn how to become an adult. And so I think that we have some control over that. Like, don't pathologize the biology. The biology is happening. Embrace that that's happening, but we can make the social environment so much more better and supportive, and real interactions as opposed to social media. And that is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But social media is the worst. Right?
They cut your mic,
everybody
Lisa.
knows
Look
this.
it. No. We'll see what we can get Lisa's mic up as well.
Oh,
There we go.
hello? Oh, yeah. So does the social environment affect hormones?
Yes.
I knew the answer.
And I didn't plant the question. But absolutely, and that's part of that feedback and sculpting the brain. The social environment is changing your hormones, your reproductive hormones, your stress hormones, your reward hormones. All of those things are being influenced by your social environment. Yeah.
Okay, it's a great start, Melissa. You know what you're talking about. No, this is really, really enlightening. So Dr. Clark, I'm going to move on to you now because I think for a lot of people, the next hormonal hurdle in their life may be if they can or choose pregnancy. And so through the perinatal phase, which is pregnancy and up to a year afterward, is the time that we're going to be speaking about next. So what are the changes in a woman's brain during this period? How are we seeing these changes manifest?
Yeah, so how are the changes in our brain during pregnancy and postpartum? Well, there are lots of changes going on, and I will say that we don't fully understand all of them, which is why we need continued research in women. But there are changes such as decreases in gray matter in different parts of the region, and this continues on through pregnancy on into postpartum. But we're also seeing these hormonal fluctuations. So we know that in pregnancy, we have this rise of estradiol, this rise of progesterone, prolactin, other hormones that are increasing, and then they're just falling off of a cliff postpartum. But with those changes, it's affecting our neurotransmitters in our brain that regulate our emotions. So serotonin would be one that maybe many are familiar with. And some people are more sensitive to those changes and that dysregulation, which gets us into how that might impact mood.
So let's talk about postpartum health for a second. So baby has arrived. What are the changes that are happening in our brains at that time?
At the time the baby arrives, a lot of the changes have already happened, during pregnancy and depending on what's happened to the woman during pregnancy. But again, these are changes in white matter, gray matter, and they're affecting different regions. And how it impacts the woman or the birthing person is that it might change how they are functioning cognitively in terms of their focus shifts to, the baby and how to be a good mom and how to keep the baby safe and things like that versus maybe some other things that may have been a focus before they delivered or before they had a child.
I mean, I have to ask the question because I kind of teased it off the top. I know after I had my child and I started to just be so forgetful about things. And I just said, oh my God, this is the baby brain, mommy brain thing.
Yeah.
Or baby brain, I guess, baby brain. So it sounds really medical, I know, but
Yes.
is it actually a thing?
So a lot of my patients would tell you absolutely, yes, it is a thing. And we would say that the brain it does not change. People are not losing their ability to have memories or form short-term memories or long-term memories or things like that, but the focus is shifting. So yes, there are some things that have less focus based on changes in the brain and things that the brain adapts to so that it can be more focused on caring for the baby and things like that. Actually, there has been studies that show that women who have been pregnant, had children, have better long-term memories than those who have never been pregnant. So there is, so it doesn't mean that just because you had a child, like your memory is shot, although it may feel that way initially. And some of these changes that occur acutely only last for 2 years, and the brain goes, will go back to what it was at baseline. So it's also not permanent for some of those changes. But I think this is a question that I would love to hear Lisa weigh in on.
No, yeah, they cut my mic again. They keep cutting my mic.
Don't take it personally.
Oh, there you go. There. No, you did a great job. And it reminds me of we did do one study in pregnant people where we took them into the lab and we gave them a bunch of memory tests, and there was absolutely no difference between people that were pregnant versus people that weren't, which is very gratifying to see. Where there was a difference was we asked everyone, because we were looking at something called prospective memory. So we asked everyone to take an envelope that was already stamped and mail it 1 week from that day, their visit. And all of the pregnant people forgot and never. But I think that's just real world, right? We have a lot of distractions, right? And they're getting ready for baby. So sure, there might be some things that, that we would notice. I certainly also noticed. I couldn't remember where I parked my car every day when I was pregnant with my daughter every day. And there were 10 flights of the parking garage. And I literally, I knew it was like 7, 8, 9, 10. But I couldn't remember which one. Anyway, so some things do happen, but I was just distracted when I came into work.
Right, it's true. Okay, so let's talk about mental illness because I think, I think it was also on a recent podcast where one of my experts had said, where we are today talking about perimenopause and menopause, it's kind of when you look at what the discussion was around postpartum depression, there was that same sort of hill and stigma and silence around postpartum depression. And we have now largely really sort of talked about it much more openly, I think, than we ever have before. So when we talk about the prevalence of mental illness through this time of the perinatal phase or even postpartum, what are we seeing in terms of mental health and moms and the women and those who are giving birth in terms of our stability and our mental health through this time? What do you see in your research?
Yeah, so first of all, I must say that it's extremely common to have a mental illness during the perinatal period, and especially during the postpartum period. We know that 1 in 5 globally will have a mood or anxiety disorder in the postpartum period. That's pretty significant and pretty common. So 1 in 5, I mean, it's a lot of us in this room, so think about that. And I always mention that to my patients who come in, and they're like, how is it possible? Like, I know nobody. I'm like, you have to know 5 people. One of them has experienced this. If you know 5 friends, 5 family members who've had a baby. But what's happening is that I spoke a little bit about this. So all of these hormones are rising during pregnancy and then dropping literally off a cliff at delivery. And some people are more sensitive to that dysregulation. It's a normal dysregulation. It's not abnormal to have them rise and fall with delivery. But for some people, that change, they're exquisitely vulnerable to and sensitive to, and it onsets depression and anxiety symptoms during the postpartum period. But we know that a third of women will have this onset during pregnancy, and so they're thinking it's just pregnancy, like okay, I'm more tired, I'm more irritable because I'm pregnant, I'm just emotional because I'm pregnant, but actually they're developing the symptoms of a mood disorder that they only really truly recognize after having the baby. So we know that this is extremely common. Thankfully, we do talk about it a whole lot more now, and it's becoming much more normalized. A lot more people are getting help, recognizing it early, and talking to friends and family about it.
This is a question for both of you, Dr. Holmes and Dr. Clark. Is there any connection between perhaps what that transition is like on that onset of puberty and now hormones racing through our veins, and then the next big hormonal shift in our life if pregnancy is in the cards? Is there any kind of connection or things that we can draw between those two experiences or transitions?
Am I? Oh, yeah. Still eating the mic. Sorry. Yes. So what happens to you in puberty is absolutely changing your vulnerability for throughout later stages in life. So if you have experience of a mood disorder during puberty, then you are more susceptible to have mood disorders later in life, either consistent or like relapses. So I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I would add that, so some of the markers I look for when I'm talking to a patient who's presenting in pregnancy and is worried about postpartum depression, maybe they've never even had it, definitely asking, do they have a history, in their teenage years or something of depression or anxiety. But I also ask them about their menstrual cycle. Have they ever had worsening of mood prior to their period? Like, not just a little bit of PMS, but like it's bad, it's noticeable. And that's in itself is a marker that they might be sensitive to hormonal dysregulation at any reproductive phase. So in pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, even going through infertility treatments. And so yes, puberty definitely is a good time to better understand and know, that you have these symptoms that may predict later concerns as well.
So this is a double barrel question for both of you as well. We know that there are ethnic differences in a person's brain health and mental health. So can we also talk about that? And in general, the vulnerabilities, what are the risk factors that you may see that may increase someone's prevalence, perhaps, of having a mental health issue throughout either one of those developmental stages? In other words, what can we know going into it? If we're in this room because we want to learn, right? So it's either about our own health or someone that we know, someone we're raising, that we can either smooth the way or perhaps recognize and mitigate risk factors. And perhaps ethnicity and race is one of those. Am I getting that right?
I'll start with the puberty angle. And so what I would say is this is so complicated and it's so understudied, right? So we do not have enough information to easily answer that question. There are a lot of things going on. There can be a genetic component to something, and there can also be a sociocultural component to something. So for example, with puberty onset, to be honest, the biggest predictor of whether you're going to have an onset of a mood disorder during puberty, if you're a girl, is the timing of your puberty. Did you go through puberty early or through puberty late? Okay, early is a higher risk of onset of a mood disorder. However, age of onset of pubertal timing is associated with ethnicity. So that might be a factor, but you have to be cautious about assigning it to a genetic component versus a sociocultural component, because then if there are issues with socioeconomic status, stability of the community, things like that, then that is also influencing. So it's important to tease it apart. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree with that as well. And we don't know enough about brain changes and if there are any specific differences between racial groups. But what we do know is that certain groups are more at risk for experiences, adverse trauma, for example. Trauma definitely can change the brain, and we're still trying to understand the ways in which it does that. Definitely systemic determinants of health, as well as social determinants of health. So we're thinking about, where you grew up, where were you educated, what type of resources did you, have access to, whether that's a good grocery store, less fast food, a green park, all those types of things. What type of household did you grow up in? All of these factors impact mental health, and it can definitely have an impact on mental health in the long run.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Galea, one of the areas of research and interest that has exploded over the last several years is, of course, the hot button issue of menopause.
Love it.
Yeah, do we love it?
We love
We
it.
love it. Okay, if you say so. As a woman firmly in perimenopause myself, I don't love it.
Yeah.
She doesn't love it at all. So of course we know now, as we're starting to learn more, just like we talked about with postpartum, understanding it more, talking about it more, we're understanding that perimenopause for some women could actually start as early as their mid-30s, and the average age of menopause, and correct me if I'm wrong, 51,
51.8 years of age.
right?
55
So
years.
let's talk about menopause now as a brain event, because I think a lot of people have focused on our reproductive organs and that it's an ovarian event. But we're starting to understand there's a lot changing up here as well. So what are the most significant changes happening in our brain as a result of going through the perimenopause or the menopause transition?
Yeah, great question. So I want to preface it by saying that even though there are ovarian hormones, the sort of more common ones are estradiol and progesterone, they act on receptors, and the estrogen receptors, progesterone receptors, and those receptors are in every single organ. What did you say, Melissa? It's a full body event, right? Puberty is a full body event. Same thing with pregnancy, same thing with perimenopause and menopause. So in terms of what's happening specifically in the brain, pretty much you name it, because they are everywhere. So we see gray matter changes, gray matter being those sort of brain cells. We see white matter changes. That's like the highways or the roads between connecting our sort of big brain cell areas. They're called nuclei. And we also see lower levels of metabolism also that occur. And a lot of that work is from some brilliant researchers, Lisa Mosconi and Roberta Brinton.
So I'm going to ask the same question that I asked Dr. Holmes and Dr. Clark about this hormonal story that we're starting to piece together, this arc of hormones in our life that begin in puberty, through potentially the childbearing years, and now in menopause. So as the bookend to that hormonal story, what is the connection, if you are able to look back at every other, hormonal transition in your life? What's the story that menopause is telling us that we can learn from those other stages?
So I think there's a couple of things. One, we've already touched upon the fact that there are some people that are hormonally sensitive, right? So if you're more sensitive to menstrual cycle swings, I certainly had a little bit of irritability, I would say. And I noticed it very much during my perimenopause. That was my first sign that I was like, oh, something's happening. So people are hormonally sensitive. If you have PMDD, premenstrual disorder, you're more likely to have postpartum depression, and you're also more likely to be sensitive to those perimenopausal fluctuations. So anytime you see these fluctuations during puberty, during pregnancy, and the postpartum where it plummets, perimenopause, it's no different. It's quite a roller coaster of hormones that occur. If you've already experienced it, you're also more likely to see it. And the last thing I'd say is adolescence. There's also something called maturescence, which is during pregnancy, and we don't have a name for it in perimenopause, but it's something to do with the brain reorganizing. There's significant changes that are occurring during the brain, which makes sense during all those periods. And so why is it so surprising that the brain might also have some significant changes during menopause? Some of them are for the better, probably.
Oh, we'll get to that. And I think you bring up a good point. I don't want to sound like we're pathologizing any of this. This is absolutely normal, natural transition through life. Culture has pathologized it. and made it, I think your word was atypical. Just being a woman is considered atypical because we're not male. But this is absolutely natural and normal. We're just trying to understand it better. So 80% of people going through menopause will experience some kind of symptoms as a result of the transition. What are some of those symptoms?
Oh, this is such a good question. And the more you dive into that, the more you realize we don't know. So remember I said 3% of studies are in females looking at the brain or psychiatry. For menopause specifically, it's 0.5%. So it's really, really short, small numbers we're talking about. But in terms of menopausal symptoms, people will talk about, there's one particular scale that's used a lot, and they talk about 11 symptoms. When you look, there's actually somewhere between 30 and 60 symptoms of menopause, including, which I had, itchy skin. I don't know if any of you have gone through menopause and had itchy skin.
Same. I'm itchy right now, Lisa.
Yeah, sorry, I'm so sorry.
Right?
Dry
I'm on
eyes.
antihistamines. Like, it's a situation.
No, it's
serious.
I'd be like, what the heck? I actually said something else than heck, but and I thought it's not, this can't be. But again, remember those estrogen and progesterone receptors are everywhere, including in your skin, including in your eye. So unfortunately, it's not very well studied, right? If our scale is actually using these 11 symptoms, but there's actually 60-ish, even if there's double 22, we don't know enough about them because we're not looking at them. But the big two,
Give us, hit it. It's a hit list. Let's go.
And there's a large variation. So yes, 80% of us will experience menopausal symptoms. Some people sail through, right? That's that heterogeneity, that beautiful heterogeneity, that one size doesn't fit all. Vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes or flushes, depending on if you're British or not, and night sweats. From my own, you can have them together. A lot of people have them together. Or in my example, I just have night sweats. I have those beautiful damp sheets every night. And so those are the sort of the big ones. The other one would be mood swings. So mood changes quite a bit.
Rage. Oh, sorry. That was my inside voice.
Rage is a good one. I'm going to say some words that you might be uncomfortable with, like vaginal dryness is another one, but you can also have vaginal wetness. Your periods can also, so when I was going through, I was like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm not dry. It turns out, no, that's another symptom. Sorry, I know I'm crass. And as well, your periods, often people talk about irregular periods. Your periods are getting irregular, but no, for some people, they get more regular. So also kind of an interesting.
For some heavy.
Some are
I
very
think they
heavy.
call them gushers.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. I thought I
We're
was
all friends here.
Yeah. I thought it was dying.
I've had a lot of
Yeah.
people in my life, and they thought that they were dying.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, same. Yeah, so they're quite variable. But I would say that those are probably the main ones. I'm looking at someone over there named Dr. Laura Gravelsons, and we just wrote a beautiful review about all of this. So you could talk to her at the break.
And do we see an increased prevalence of something like anxiety or depression?
Yeah, mood disorders. So
Moods.
Irritability, like you said, but absolutely depression, anxiety, particularly during that perimenopausal stage. And I will say menopause, and Shirley Weir first said this to me, and she runs something called Menopause Chicks. Menopause is one day. So menopause is defined 12 months after your last menstrual period. But that perimenopausal stage lasts anywhere from 2 to even 14 years, I've seen. And then the other thing that's really interesting is people assume that menopause symptoms, like those vasomotor symptoms, stop at menopause, like that one day. Do they stop? No, they don't. They last many, many, many years afterwards. But the standard questionnaires stop asking. So again, even if they've done the research, they haven't done the best research that they could possibly be doing.
That's where I get to editorialize, because I'm not the neuroscientist, where I can say that's where there is misogyny in medicine. We become irrelevant to culture after we're done having babies. And I think that's part of that misogyny and push to say we still matter, even if we don't have periods and can't produce babies for a culture. Don't let me get started, Dr. Lisa. Don't let me get started, Dr. Lisa. You know. I mean, look at us. Do we look like we're done? Just getting started. God. I need to get professional again.
Yeah. No, it's totally fine.
So another huge part of your research that I discovered on my podcast with you and Dr. Jenny Rabin was how just the experience of going through menopause alone puts us at such an increased risk for so many other diseases.
Yes.
So can you talk to us about the connection of menopause? And in this context, because we're talking about our brains, what are the things that we start to see that we need to really get very serious about in the research to understand? And I right away start to think about dementia and Alzheimer's as an example.
Yeah. And that's part of what I research is Alzheimer's disease. So, and again, we're not pathologizing menopause, right? Menopause is natural. Every half of the population will go through menopause, just like everyone is going to go through, almost everyone's going to go through puberty. So in terms of your risk for dementia and specifically Alzheimer's disease, there are certain factors that put you at greater risk. It's not an inevitable part of aging. Right? We want to thrive when we age. We don't want to languish when we age. So in terms of Alzheimer's disease, it'll be the earlier age of menopause. So if you're at, so the average age is around 51. If you're, let me say 40-ish, which would be an early menopause, that would put you at greater risk to develop Alzheimer's disease later in life. It's not just Alzheimer's disease. You see more cognitive decline. You see more what we call Alzheimer's disease pathology in the brain, and greater risk for dementia. There's more things I want to say, but they went out of my head because they just did. They flew away.
It'll come back to you. It'll come back. I want to open up the floor to all of our experts because, you know, the positive part about all of this, and I think the reason why I think so many people are here, you remember? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Those vasomotor symptoms we talked about, hot flashes and night sweats, they are all, it's important to I would say it's important to seek treatment for them. And the reason I say this is there's new literature showing that if you are more susceptible to these and you are experiencing them, they disrupt your sleep. Right? And we already know that sleep is really important. Sleep hygiene is really important for your brain health. And also, if you have poor sleep hygiene, you're at greater risk to develop Alzheimer's disease. So whether and how they're coupled completely and whether or not we can divorce them, we don't know. But it turns out that if you have severe vasomotor symptoms, you're at even greater risk to develop something called mild cognitive impairment. And people with mild cognitive impairment, 50% of them will go on to develop Alzheimer's disease. So it's in your best interest to reduce those vasomotor symptoms.
Okay, let's open up the floor now because I love being proactive. I think a lot of people are here because they want to learn and age powerfully.
And gracefully.
Doesn't graceful sound so passive, doctor?
It does. It does.
Okay. There. So listen, we want to grab life by the horns every single stage in life. So whether we're whatever stage we're in right now, or we are trying to raise the next generation of young people, or we've got people in our lives that we're supporting through pregnancy. Listen, what are the things that we can do today to really make sure that through every single one of these big transitions in our lives that we're able to thrive or help those around us going through it thrive? Let's talk about whatever it's that modifiable factor, risk factors, whatever it is, positive behaviors that we can enact to really support ourselves and others going through this thing called life the best that we can.
Well, I would just go back to the social environment.
Yeah.
Shocker.
I know. It's what I study. And the importance of it. And I mean, recognizing and embracing the bidirectional relationship between biology, right, your body, and the world in which you live. And that I think this message is out there, and I'm going to share it again, which is like, be kind to each other.
Be nice. Gosh, it doesn't take that much, right?
Be kind
Be
to
nice.
yourself. Your body is changing. Your brain is changing. That's
Normal.
I know. I was like, I don't love using the word normal, but that's perfectly normal. Like that is what is happening. So learn about it, educate yourself, identify when something is potentially in need of clinical support, but otherwise little forgiveness, self-forgiveness, forgiveness of others, support of others, and recognize that we're all kind of in this together.
I think if I'm talking about the perinatal period, I would say, get help early. I personally think, having a therapist should be like a regular checkup, just like our physical checkups. We check in with our mental health. You definitely want to do that when you're about to have a child or you find out you're pregnant. It's okay to just check into a women's mental health program, just so you're prepared, you get some education, review some things. And if you need to do more, then great, you have that resource there. But so often I find people suffering, it's 14 months postpartum and they're like, I've been feeling this way this whole time. I just thought I would come in and see if there's something wrong with me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you've been suffering like this whole time. And it's not just the person who's suffering, the whole family suffering, the baby suffering. So I say reach out early, often, and yes, be kind to one another. This is a very common but treatable condition.
Yeah, mental health is health. That's the CAMH byline, and I think it's really important to remind yourself of that. And then I have an acronym, DRESS, which stands for diet. Mediterranean diet is one. R is reduce your stress, exercise, your body and mind, social support, Melissa, and sleep. So all of those things we know can improve brain health.
I don't know if I'm going to throw a curveball at you, but, we're sitting in this esteemed place, and I do want to talk about treatments. I mean, stigma is something that we've all kind of danced around a little bit. And I think even though we're slowly breaking away stigma for different things, especially as women, we carry a lot of guilt and a lot of shame about a lot of things. And I think there is still such a wall of silence for a lot of people who are suffering. And whether it's starting in those very earliest years through pregnancy and postpartum, and certainly through menopause, there's still a lot of silence around it. So what would you think, we are in this room, we're all pulling the same line here. We want to learn more and speak on it more. But what is really that harm when someone is not seeking care and we're still either self-stigmatizing or really getting crushed under the stigma in culture? I mean, what is the danger and what do we still need to do to push through that?
Okay. So Crystal, you raised it also about if, for example, in postpartum depression, there's effects on the family, right? So it's not necessarily just about yourself and your own vulnerability, because, for example, as we've discussed, if you have a mood disorder during adolescence, you are at higher risk, right, for that at later points in your life. So treating it early is really important for potentially reducing the vulnerability at other stages in life. But there's transgenerational effects also. So if and speaking of mom guilt, sorry, I live it intensely. But if you have a mood disorder during the postpartum period, you are also influencing your infant. So that is important and shaping their life trajectory in ways that you may not anticipate or want. So it's important to seek help if you need it as early as possible.
Yeah, I would add to that and just say that, just to even get more specific. So what types of things can happen from not getting treated during pregnancy or postpartum when you have a mood, anxiety disorder, or some other form of mental illness? Well, first, there's obstetrical complications. So, often women are thinking, well, if I just make it through, if I just hold on, but there's risk to the baby in utero, to the fetus. There's risk for preterm birth, small for birth weight babies. And those two conditions themselves increase the risk of mortality for that child. So these are things we have to be thinking about. It's really about the mother and infant. Postpartum is similar. We're talking about a mom who is depressed or anxious increases the risk of cognitive, social, and emotional delays on that infant. And so it's so important to get the help that they need so that they can also have a healthy developing child. And of course, no one intends to do that. You know, it's not that these mothers don't love their children or aren't doing everything possible to keep their child safe, but there's just things that are happening because of the depression and the anxiety that increase those risk factors for the infant.
And I'll add on the menopause stage and then want to try and finish with something. But, and that is if 80% of us that are going through menopause experience symptoms, and the number one symptom is these hot flashes and night sweats. And I've told you that the chance of, if you have severe symptoms, particularly, you're more at risk to develop Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment. And the number one thing you can do to treat yourself, if you're a candidate for it, is to take menopausal hormone therapy. That is the number one. There are some other treatments, non-hormonal treatments, but the one that works really, really well is hormonal. I don't like saying replacement therapy because it's not really replacing. However, when you go to, and I'm not blaming the healthcare practitioners because they get very little education in medical school on menopause. However, the question they'll ask you, is it bothering you? And I find that really a little judgmental. Again, I'm not blame. That's it. That's written in the contract, so to speak. If you're mentioning it, I kind of feel like it's bothering you. The sort of better treatment out there that's available, the small little bit of research that's out there would suggest that transdermal approaches are going to be more safe than oral approaches. And that's also true for people with
like
a
through the
risk.
skin?
Yeah, sorry,
creams.
through the skin, like a patch or a gel. Also vaginal is also very safe. There's been a huge study looking at 10 million people in the UK showing it didn't increase the risk of a variety of cancers. And the last thing I want to say in terms of stigma, I know it's difficult. In my own family, we have addiction, anxiety, psychosis, depression, pretty much a potpourri, and that's in a very, very, very close family. 1 in 2 of us, by the time we're 40, will experience mental illness. 1 in 2. So that means it's either us or someone we love. And so I don't know why there's such a stigma, because it happens all around us. And I mean, I do wish that we had more mental health check-ins that are just for everyone all the time. I'd love to pressure our governments to include that in our healthcare, right?
It's true. That concludes this first portion. And I want to say a huge thank you to each of you for that and all the research and work that you do. Changing lives. All right, it is time to open up the floor to all of you. And I know we have also some online questions as well. So we've got a microphone. I think we only have one microphone.
Yes, we have 2 mics. We'll
Two
start
mics.
with one online question, and then Alexia will be looking for folks in the audience.
Great.
Alexia's over there in red.
Great. Do you have the online question,
Yes, I
Nicole?
do. So I can read that out.
Okay.
So our first online question, what are some strategies to maintain or improve cognitive function as we age? What is the impact of HRT on brain function?
I guess that's me. So the evidence that is out there, again, not very little evidence out there, but it depends on menopausal hormone therapy type. But the evidence that is out there, especially for those transdermal and estradiol approaches, is that it improves brain function. So we have a paper that we have submitted looking at the Canadian Longitudinal Study of Aging. So it's all Canadian women. And it turns out, the other thing is, scientists, we can talk for a long time. I'm going to try to talk for a very short period of time. Memory is not one thing, right? You can have spatial memory, for example. You can have memory of what Melissa said just a little while ago. You can have memory of like, oh, I need to remember to book my kids' dentist appointments. And you can also have attention sort of memory as well. Like, oh yes, I have to pay attention. I have to remember this phone number long enough to dial it. So it turns out that transdermal forms are very good, are associated with increased scores for verbal memory, those kinds of things.
Can I ask a bit of a controversial question? Because tackling misinformation is one of my favorite pastimes.
Yeah.
And you can be following some people on social media, some of which are really prominent doctors, who will say the following with their full chest.
Yeah.
Taking menopause hormone therapy will help prevent dementia. True or false?
Well, again, 0.5% of the studies out there are looking at menopause in particular. There is quite a huge meta-analysis that Jenny Rabin didn't like as much. This is what's fun if you listen to the podcast. I think we both talk about it. But it was, so meta-analysis just means, so she's asking true or false. The meta-analysis is a lot of different studies that are put together. They found true. So it did reduce the risk of neurodegenerative disorders. So that's Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, and a variety of others. So again, but it will likely depend on the type of menopause you have, because there are many different types of menopause. It's going to depend on the type of hormone therapy that you took and for when. And those are the kinds of questions. And I see somebody else in the audience that really wants to address those kinds of questions. Matea, I'm looking at you.
Okay, let's get to the audience, Nicole. Okay, great. Hi.
Hi, good evening, ladies and everyone here. My question is for Dr. Lisa. I hear so much about menopause and periods,
Yep.
but what happens to someone like myself who had a hysterectomy in her early 40s? And I was told that last year that I'm full-blown menopause.
Welcome
There's-
to the club.
It's not a really good club to be in.
I'm gonna make it a good club. Don't worry.
Yeah, so my question is like, where do I go? What do I do? And also, I'm someone else again who has lots of different mental health challenges, take medications for that, and I feel lost.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that you feel lost. Hysterectomies don't put you into menopause. That's the removal of your uterus, but it does hasten it. So your ovaries, it tends to be about 2 to 3 years later that people will say, oh yeah, you're in full-blown menopause. I'm curious as to how they say, yes, you're in menopause, because that's hard to, it's okay. You don't have to answer that question. We can talk afterwards, but it's actually harder to, there's no good biomarker for it. People will say you have increased FSH and LH levels or low levels of something called anti-Mullerian hormone. But actually, when you look at the charts, there's a huge variability in those levels. And so it's really hard to say, yes, for sure, you're in it, especially when you haven't been menstruating, right?
I'm guessing you're very symptomatic. Mhm.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
thresholds, yeah. Are you experiencing those? Yeah. 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 Well, actually, this is very sad, but if you say let's say there's 40 symptoms, doesn't really matter. We can pick whatever number you want. The average number of those symptoms that people experience is 7. So then do you remember in math class, do you remember permutations and combinations? So it's like 40 and 7. Like I don't, Arjun, you'd probably know the formula better than I know the formula, but it turns out it's like 18 million possible combinations you can have if you take 40 and 7 of those. So it's just, we don't know enough information. We don't have enough information to say, this is what you should take. I really hope AI gets us there, right? Right now we're so far behind.
Now I'm going to ask one more question. We're going to get to a lot of questions, but is hormone therapy an option? Have you discussed that with your doctor?
In terms of I forget the terminology for it, but I do the vaginal one.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
You like the vaginal?
Yeah.
And that has helped quite a lot.
Good. Yeah. I know people need some others. Yeah. Yeah, the North American Menopause Society does recommend menopausal hormone therapy. So it's definitely something to talk to your healthcare provider about.
Okay, we've got.
We have two more questions, one online, and then we'll do that one. And then
One online. Okay, yes. Okay.
back to online. So since everything and anything can be a symptom of perimenopause, are there any particular things to watch out for with memory, mood, etc.? So I know.
I have one for Melissa, but I will answer that one. And then I have one for Melissa, just so that Melissa gets a chance. And then I'll ask Crystal.
I'm okay.
I think that's a really great question. The number one, again, is going to be hot flashes and night sweats, realizing they can be divorced. So you can use me as an example. I only have night sweats. I've only ever had night sweats. So it doesn't mean that you have to. And, it's not necessarily the classic one you see in the movies where somebody goes completely red and sweats. It doesn't have to be that way. But that would be the number one. The next number one, I think, is actually as urinary incontinence. There's vaginal dryness, but also mood. Mood would be probably
Painful
the next
sex.
one. Painful sex, yeah.
Yeah, I would just add about the mood. We know that a lot of people who have a history of a mood disorder will have worsening in the perimenopausal period. And it will, like, no matter if you're being treated or not, it just kind of does its own thing. And we need to figure out how to address that. For many, doing hormone replacement therapy is going to be the trick to adding that to what you're already taking. Sometimes it requires adjustments to the medications you're already taking. Sometimes it requires starting all over again. It's definitely not a one size fits all. So again, seeking help early.
There's also a study, it was a long time ago, suggesting that if you took hormonal therapy, and I don't know what kind it was probably, conjugated equine estrogens, and you were taking an SSRI, like a Prozac, it actually worked better, but it's like very few studies, right?
It's one study out of Europe. It was a transdermal estradiol that seems to be more effective. Also with the SSRI, like sertraline or escitalopram or something. Yeah.
Okay, so layperson over here, can I ask a question? So someone can be on menopausal hormone therapy and be on medications for, certain mental health concerns at the same time. Of course, you're going to talk to your doctor, but it can be done.
Yes.
Okay, that's very hopeful. That's very hopeful.
Can I ask Melissa a question?
Okay.
Maybe this is, what's kisspeptin? Because there was a lady over here who said, I don't know if I'm going to learn anything new. So unfortunately she left, but I wanted that was
learn
directly for
kisspeptin?
her.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
What's kisspeptin?
okay,
Because I bet, how many of you have heard of kisspeptin? It's a hormone.
it's
a
like
hormone.
super important.
It's super important
It's super- there you go.
puberty.
For puberty. So we don't actually know exactly how puberty starts, right? Like that's one of the many, many things that to the most molecular detail we are still trying to figure out. However, kisspeptin is the hormone that kind of kickstarts the whole process.
Isn't that cool? Isn't that
So it gets it all going, and it works that way in males and females a little bit differently, but it's super important for ultimately allowing females to cycle, right? So we have a special population of kisspeptin cells in our brain.
Are they called candy?
The candy neurons.
They're called candy neurons.
KNDY, that are important for allowing you to have that, to start and maintain that hormonal cycle that is associated with menstruation. So kisspeptin is
Yes, team
Yeah.
team kisspeptin. What is it called?
kisspeptin.
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 Oh, that's nice. That's nice. It's nice. Okay, your question in front.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and insights. My name is Maya. I am a mental health advocate. I deal with mental illness, and actually I had treatment here at CAMH. Thank you, CAMH. Before I ask my question, is this being recorded?
Yes.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to know how much to share. For some of us who have had really adverse life experiences since early childhood, for example, in my case, I speak about this openly, my first suicide attempt, I was less than 10 years old. And I continue to deal with mental illness. I have support and so on. But for those of us who are already seeing the extremities. I just turned 41. I'm already seeing before my period, the mood swings are getting worse. Just starting to feel the night sweats. Life is stressful. What can we do beyond the DRESS acronym that you shared, for example, doctor? But what can we really do beyond? It's like, I know it's coming and it's looking bad. It looks like it's going to be pretty effed up. Sorry, I know there's a child in the room. But what can we actually do to help ourselves before shit happens? Like before this all comes our way, and knowing that myself, probably a lot of women in here are at higher risk for dementia, are because of what we have been through and what we are going through. Is there anything that you would recommend? Or is it really continue therapy, medication, hormones, keep standing on one leg, meditating, like all of the above? Soak in the tub.
Thank you for the question and thank you for sharing. Thank you.
I'm going to start. I'm not going to finish because I don't think I'm the best person to answer this question. But what I would say is educate yourself, inform yourself, and advocate for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing.
And that's what you're doing. Yeah. Good.
And I'm sorry to be pointy, but like,
I think she started and finished. Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was going to say too. I mean, you're already doing it. But that,
but use good information.
use good information, yeah, watch your sources. But you said something that was really interesting, right? I recognize in myself. So you're the best knowledge keeper of you. And so I think I shared that when I went into menopause, maybe I didn't, I was irritable. And I actually had that same kind of feeling when I was younger. And what helped me was going on hormonal contraceptives. So I went back to my doctor and I said, she was the she just said, what do you want me to do? And so I said, let me try hormonal contraceptives again. I did. And for me, it was great, but that's not going to be helpful for everyone. So what has worked in the past might work again, but find a healthcare practitioner that you trust and, is willing to work through the process with you. That's my advice.
Okay, we're getting the wrap. Look, time flies when we're having fun. Are we sticking around a little bit outside? If you're able to, of course, I'm not going to pressure the doctors. You're very busy. But if you are able to, I will be outside, and perhaps you can steal a moment or two. I have a last few things is, these are one of these nights when you realize just how dirty we've been done by the medical system. And I don't want to get on my high horse here for a second, but I think that this is part of progress. I think all of us getting together, being able to mine phenomenally smart Canadian experts in their fields to be able to share your time with us tonight. There is such a lack of training and understanding when it comes to whether it's medical schools, our own practitioners. And I think I echo everything that all of you have said up here. It's about education and it's about advocating for yourself, as we were saying. And no, there's a lot of doctors that don't have a lot of training in this stuff, but I think if we keep pushing, then we have to be the change. And so I'm so proud that we're able to do this, that we're able to have a venue to do this. This in and of itself is progress, I think. And so advocate for yourself and don't stop. I know we're in a medical healthcare crisis right now. I know some people don't even have doctors. I know, but we got to keep pushing because half the population can't be ignored any longer. We just can't, and we won't. We won't. So thank you so much for all of your expertise, to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. We have a raffle. If you all got tickets outside, is that right? Okay. You tell me. You didn't get one. You didn't get one. Okay, let me mess this around. 6 prizes. Oh, we got 6 prizes. Okay, let me do one first. Okay, let me get my glasses out. Okay, if you have your raffle tickets, now is the time. Now is the time. All right, this is first ticket number 31109-054. Yay! You're number 1. I'm going to hold your ticket out. Do you want them to come on down and get the prize? On your way out, just give us your ticket. Next raffle prize, 31109-049. 049. Do we have a yes? Is that a yes? That's not. Okay. We do? Oh, there you are. Perfect. Perfect. Next one. The first numbers are the same. Oh my gosh. It's dash 000. Yes. Okay. Let me get to the bottom here. Same numbers are the same. Dash 052. 052. Yes. Great. Two more. Oh my God. We're there. Dash 037. Yes. And I think we got one more lucky ticket. Dash 025. 025. Yes, right here. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you. And thank you, doctors. Thank you.